What would you say if a cop told you to step to the back of your car right now? If you say the wrong thing, you can hand the police extra power in seconds. And once you start moving and talking, it gets much harder to take your rights back. Hit subscribe right now because what I am about to show you could protect you during the most stressful 10 seconds of a traffic stop. Like this video too, so you can find it fast when your hands are shaking and your mind goes blank. Here is what you need to know before this ever happens to you. When an officer says, "Step to the back," that moment is not small talk. That is the turning point where a simple ticket can turn into questions, consent, a search, or an arrest. I'm going to show you the first sentence to say before you move an inch, the second sentence that shuts down consent, the one mistake that makes drivers talk too much, and the final question that helps end the stop. Here is the reality. You do not win this moment by arguing. You win it by using the right words in the right order. I have analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and you see the same pattern again and again. The driver gets nervous, starts explaining, and gives away control without even knowing it. Most people think the danger starts when an officer asks to search your car. It usually starts way before that. It starts when you leave your seat, get separated from your passengers, and start answering casual questions by the rear bumper. Like you and the officer are just having a chat. You're not in a normal chat. You're in an investigation, even if nobody says that out loud. Most people have no idea how fast this goes sideways. You may think you're being polite. The officer may write in a report that you were cooperative, nervous, inconsistent, or gave consent. That is why your words matter before your feet move. Let me show you exactly how to slow this down without being rude, without resisting, and without making your stop worse. The first thing you need to do is separate a command from a request. This matters more than you think. When an officer says, "Step to the back," your brain hears authority, but your mouth needs to create clarity. Here is exactly what you say. "Officer, is that an order?" Word for word. Memorize that line. If the officer says yes, then you comply calmly. If the officer says it is just a request, you have learned something huge. You have learned that you may not need to volunteer for extra movement, extra questions, or extra contact. Why does that one sentence work so well for you? Because it forces the moment into the open. It makes the officer be clear. If it is a lawful order, you should not physically fight it. Pennsylvania v. Mims says an officer can usually order a driver out of the car during a lawful stop. Maryland v. Wilson says the same thing can apply to passengers. In plain English, if the officer is giving a real order to step out, you usually need to comply. But that does not mean you need to volunteer more than the order requires. That is the difference. Bad way. Most drivers say, "Okay, sure, no problem," then hop out and walk back chatting. Then the officer turns that movement into a fishing trip with more questions. Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, is that an order?" Then the record is clear and they comply only if told to. That little line protects you because it shows you are not choosing extra contact on your own. Former police officers have confirmed this works because officers know the difference between a clear command and casual compliance. And if body cam footage gets reviewed later, your words matter. A judge or jury can hear that you were trying to understand the scope of the stop, not pick a fight. That helps you. Now let me show you exactly what happens if you skip this step. You hear "step to the back," you jump out, and now you're standing away from your car with no barrier around you. The officer starts asking where you're coming from, where you're going, why you look nervous, whether there is anything illegal in the car, and whether anyone else has been smoking or drinking. You start talking because you already moved, so now it feels weird to stop. That is how drivers talk themselves into trouble. Watch what happens when you do it right instead. You ask, "Officer, is that an order?" If yes, you comply. Calm voice, slow hands, no argument. But now you have made one thing crystal clear. You moved because you were ordered, not because you were volunteering for a wider investigation. That one sentence also changes your mindset. You stop acting like you need to impress the officer. You start acting like someone who knows your rights and still stays respectful. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because it helps separate lawful compliance from voluntary cooperation. And that separation can matter later, if the stop grows into something bigger. You are not refusing, you are not resisting, you are making the officer define the moment. That is powerful, and it keeps you from drifting into danger on autopilot. Have you ever been told to step out or move to the back during a stop? Drop a comment below and tell me how you handled it. Now once you know it is an order and you're going to comply, your next line is the line that protects your car, your bags, and everything inside them. Here is exactly what you say. "Officer, I will comply, but I do not consent to any searches." Word for word. Memorize that line. You say it calmly. You do not shout it. You do not say it with attitude. You say it like you're reading your name off a form. Clear, firm, short. This is huge because movement and consent often get mixed together in real life. You step out, you stand by the back, you answer a few questions. Then the officer says, You do not mind if I take a quick look, right? Or the officer asks, nothing illegal in the car? Then maybe, mind if I check? Your first answer may shape everything after that. If you already gave easy, friendly, open-ended answers, many drivers feel trapped. They think saying no now will make them look guilty. That is exactly why your refusal needs to be early and clear. Bad way. Most drivers say, I've got nothing to hide. Then the search starts. Good way. Smart drivers say, officer, I will comply, but I do not consent to any searches. Then they shut the consent door before it swings open. This is 100% legal. The Fourth Amendment protects you from unreasonable searches. Consent is one of the biggest ways people give that protection away. The key case here is Schneckloth versus Bustamante. In plain English, the Supreme Court said a search can be valid if you voluntarily agree to it. That means your yes can do a lot of damage. And your clear, I do not consent, can matter a lot later, especially if the officer searches anyway and claims you agreed. Now be smart here. Your refusal does not magically stop every search. If the officer says there is probable cause, brings a dog, or claims some other legal reason, the officer may still search. But your job is not to win the roadside argument. Your job is to avoid helping the search. That is a big difference. You are preserving your position. You are not giving the officer your permission. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection in that moment because it creates a clean record. If the case goes to court, the judge may hear that you never agreed. And this is where people get fooled. The officer may say, if you have got nothing to hide, why not let me look? That is not a legal reason. That is pressure. You do not answer pressure with excuses. You answer pressure with the same line. Officer, I do not consent to any searches. That is all. No stories, no debate, no but, no unless. Just your line. Watch what happens when you stay clean and simple. The officer now has to rely on actual legal grounds, not your loose words. That changes the whole stop. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings about consent and your right to refuse it. And if the officer never had enough to search in the first place, your refusal may stop the whole thing from growing. That is why you say it before the request even comes. You're getting ahead of the trap instead of falling into it. Your third move is the one that saves you from becoming your own worst witness. Here is exactly what you say. Officer, I am choosing to remain silent, word for word. Memorize that line. Listen closely because this is critical. A lot of drivers think silence means acting rude. It does not. Silence means you stop giving the government free evidence out of your own mouth. You still give the basics your state requires, like your license, registration, and proof of insurance. You do not physically refuse lawful orders. But once that is done, you stop explaining your day, your route, your friends, and your job, your plans, and your guess about why the officer pulled you over. That casual roadside talking is where people dig their own hole. One wrong guess becomes inconsistent statements. One nervous joke becomes suspicious behavior. One harmless detail becomes the reason the officer keeps pushing. Bad way. Most drivers say I am just coming from my cousin's house, and my friend borrowed the car, and I was only speeding because I am late. Then the officer hears more questions than answers. Good way. Smart drivers say, Officer, I'm choosing to remain silent. Then the officer has a lot less to work with. This is 100% legal. The Fifth Amendment protects you from being forced to help build a case against yourself. Berkmer versus McCarty matters here. In plain English, the Supreme Court said traffic stops are serious detentions, but they usually do not work exactly like full arrests on the roadside. That means officers can still ask questions before you hear Miranda warnings, and that is why your words matter so much. If you keep talking, your statements can still be used. So you do not wait for some magic TV moment. You protect yourself early. A lot of people get confused and think, if I am innocent, I should just explain everything. That sounds nice. It fails in real life. You may be innocent and still say something incomplete, mistaken, or awkward. Stress changes how you talk. Fear changes your memory. Your heart is pounding, lights are flashing, and now you're trying to be a lawyer on the side of the road. That is not your job. Your job is to give required documents, comply with lawful orders, and stop feeding the stop with words. I have analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and the biggest mistake drivers make is not the search. It is the talking before the search. They keep trying to sound normal. They keep guessing what the officer wants to hear. They keep adding details. Then later they realize their own words did more damage than anything found in the car. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because a clear verbal choice to remain silent is far better than nervous half answers. Let me show you exactly why this matters for you. If the officer asks, "Where are you headed?" and you answer, then comes, "Where are you coming from?" Then, "Whose car is this? And anyone else been in it?" You are now in a chain. Every answer creates the next question. But if you say, "Officer, I'm choosing to remain silent," you break the chain. The officer may not like it. That is okay. Your job is not to make the officer happy. Your job is to avoid making your situation worse. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings on how your statements can be used, and it is one of the simplest ways you protect yourself. Most people already clicked away. If you are still here, you're serious about protecting your rights. Drop a comment saying I am still here, because the next part is what ends the stop instead of stretching it out. Now here is the trick they do not want you knowing. Once the reason for the stop is done, you can ask the question that forces the moment. You look at the officer and say this: "Officer, is the traffic stop over and am I free to leave?" Those exact words. You do not ask it in the first 10 seconds. You ask it after the ticket, warning, or document check is basically done. This line matters because some stops end and some stops quietly turn into fishing trips. Your question helps expose which one you are in. Bad way. Most drivers say, "So, are we good?" Then the officer keeps chatting, keeps probing, and the stop keeps dragging. Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, is the traffic stop over and am I free to leave?" Then the officer has to either end it or say you are still being detained. That answer matters for you. If the officer says yes, leave calmly. If the officer says no, now the detention is continuing, and that matters in court. The key case here is Rodriguez versus United States. In plain English, the Supreme Court said police cannot drag out a traffic stop longer than needed just to go hunting for other crimes unless they have extra legal reason called reasonable suspicion. That means the stop is supposed to be about the traffic issue, not an endless side quest. Here is the reality. A lot of bad stops grow because the driver never tests the timeline. The officer finishes the warning, then asks a few casual questions, then asks for consent, then calls for a dog, then the whole thing snowballs. Your question puts a bright line on the road. Is this over, or are you detaining me longer? Former police officers have confirmed this works because it tells the officer you understand the stop has limits. And when you ask it calmly, you are not escalating. You are documenting. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection once the original mission of the stop is done. If the officer really has more legal grounds, the officer will say so. If not, your question can make it much harder to keep you parked there just because the officer feels like digging. That is why your order matters. First, find out if step to the back is a command. Second, refuse consent. Third, stop talking. Fourth, when the traffic part is done, ask if you're free to go. That sequence keeps you from handing over your rights. Let us tie the law together. Pennsylvania v. Mims means an officer can usually order you out of the car during a lawful stop. So if it is a real order, you comply. But complying with an order is not the same as volunteering for more. Schneckloth v. Bustamante means your consent can make a search legal. So if you do not want to search, you must say so clearly. Rodriguez v. United States means the officer cannot stretch a stop longer than needed, just to fish for more crimes. So when the traffic business is done, you can ask if you are free to leave. And Berkman v. McCarty reminds you that roadside stops are still dangerous because your words can be used even before a warning. The law gives officers power, but it also gives you tools. Your power is in using short, clear lines that protect your record. Now picture this stop in real life. You get pulled over at night. Your window comes down. The officer says you rolled a stop sign and asks for your license and insurance. You hand them over. A minute later, the officer says, "Step to the back of the car. If you handle this the wrong way, you jump out fast." You walk back. The officer asks where you are coming from. You answer. The officer asks if there's anything illegal in the car. You laugh and say no. Then comes, "You do not mind if I take a quick look, right?" You say, "I guess that is fine." Now your whole night changed because your mouth kept opening. Now let me show you the right way for you.